Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. There's a serious crisis that is unfolding in the Eastern Cape, and we all need to send our prayers to all of the people who've lost their homes, who may be risking losing their lives, and we need to send our prayers to those who have lost loved ones in this critical time. There have been days of extreme weather in the Western Cape, and the death toll is rising. According to the latest media reports, over 75 people have been reported dead as a result of the flooding. Questions are now being raised about the disaster readiness from the provincial government, and there are calls right now for the declaration of a national state of disaster. As you may know, a devastating cut-off low weather system has been devastating the Eastern Cape, has unleashed days of extreme rainfall that have displaced thousands and now caused this massive death toll, which seems to be continuing to rise. And we may hear by tomorrow that the death toll has risen even further. As a result of what's unfolding, questions are being raised about the avoidability of these casualties, and criticisms are being raised about corruption in the Eastern Cape, management and mismanagement in the Eastern Cape, and whether or not the extent of these casualties could have been avoided. And part of the reason why this is being brought up is that since early June, the South African Weather Service has been issuing multiple alerts warning of flooding, disrupted transport, and coastal damage. The Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal have borne the brunt, and they've been facing widespread power outages, infrastructure damages as a result of these weather conditions. Now, understanding the condition of people who are living in rural areas, in remote areas, and understanding that this is not the same type of environment as California and maybe what you would sometimes see in Florida with states of emergencies where people can drive out of the affected area, where people can leave their homes. In the rural areas, people don't have cars, they don't have the means to leave those homes, and sometimes they may not even have the access to the internet or television services to get the information in a timeliest manner, which means that the state, the provincial leadership has a bigger role to play to get that information to risk-prone areas, and also to make sure that those areas are actually prepared for the disaster as the disaster unfolds. All lives are precious, and those who live in vulnerable communities and in remote areas should never be forgotten in times like this. According to the Ministry of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, the Eastern Cape has been the hardest hit. What the minister said is the following: while all provinces have experienced severe incidents of extremely cold weather with high winds and coastal provinces experiencing rough seas and rainfall, the province of the Eastern Cape has been the hardest hit by the current severe weather incident. The scenes in the Eastern Cape have been dramatic. We've seen torrential rainfall. We've seen extensive flooding, landslides. Rooftops have been ripped off buildings. Homes are being washed away. Right now, that is what has been happening. Flooding and landslides have displaced thousands of people, and residents are in temporary shelters across the region. Reports indicate that in the Amatole district, more than 200 people were relocated from the Sikiti informal settlement to AB Bam Primary School, and hundreds more are sheltered in the Butterworth Town Hall. This is what the minister had to say about the unfolding disaster.
It's a terrible situation, indeed, and it happened at a wrong time at night when people were sleeping. So I've never seen this thing. And now you talk about almost more than 500 meters moving from the river bank into community or houses here. That is, water was flowing all over, almost at about 3 to 4 meters high. So it's a bad situation, terrible.
Premier, let's talk about the divers that are not found locally, because yesterday we were told that they are coming from Eastland and some are coming from Port Elizabeth and stuff. Why don't we have divers in Mthatha?
No, it's a question that we've been reporting every time we experience disasters, and we are now know, at least for the last 2 years or so, that we are a disaster-prone province. The area that is under-resourced is the eastern part of the province. We have been speaking to South African police services, for instance, about that, talking about the aerial services intervention your police, your helicopters. We said you can't service Eastern Cape with one helicopter that is in Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha. Because when the weather is bad, that helicopter cannot move out of Gqeberha. So you need a helicopter station in Mthatha. You need more resources. You need K9 unity station in Mthatha, because this area covers the bigger part of the population of the province. So that's what we are working on with Polygol. We've been raising this because you would understand, even if we want to, we can't create our own K9. That must be done procedurally via South African Police Services. So we have been putting that across. We need more human resource. We need more capital resources deployed in this part. Because when things like this happen, we are always found wanting, we are paralyzed, we don't know where to, we are calling everybody around, and resources where they reside cannot easily move into this side. I hope that now everybody is realizing that what we have been saying, that we need to establish, the province is so vast. The province is so vast, you can't service it from Gqeberha, you can't service it all from East London. You've got to deal with this part of the eastern part of the province. Yes, in the past we have never experienced disasters like this, but now we know that the climate change or global warming is here, it is inevitable. We have never seen such amount of water floods during winter in this part of the province. So now we are used into this in summer. We are always anticipating. So it's clear, but also thanks to South African Weather Services, because surely many people would have taken heed of warnings that have been coming out. We have been warned almost a week before, but we still want to appeal to our people to make sure that they respond to that. And definitely I want to take the opportunity to convey our very heartfelt condolences to families. Now we have identified bodies. Families have lost their loved one. Families have lost their kids. It's a fact. So we want to reach out, and we're here to pledge solidarity. We're here to comfort. We're here to support rescue team. We're here to identify more and assist where we can assist. Government will do everything in our power to make sure that we mitigate these disastrous effects.
I think it's fair to question the state of readiness in the Eastern Cape and the responsibilities of the provincial leadership to manage and mitigate the current crisis that is unfolding. I think it's fair for people to ask whether the provincial leadership has been able to manage the resources which they have been allocated for disasters and in general. This is not something that is coming out of the blue. Climate change has been affecting various provinces. And for instance, we all saw the devastation wreaked in KwaZulu-Natal in 2022. And that should have led to more preparation, more proactive planning from provinces that are at risk, and coastal provinces are at risk. There should have been more done to entail that there's recruitment and training of drivers, divers, there's procurement of helicopters, there are at least resources that are responsive and personnel that is capable of dealing with the type of disasters that would unfold. At the very least, there should have been provision for a contingency budget for the hiring of emergency personnel and equipment from the private sector to help with evacuation, to help with removing children who are stranded on trees, people who are in extremely risk-prone areas. There should have been provision for contingency budget for evacuation of people. The loss of life here, I think, to an extent is avoidable and could have been mitigated by good and ethical leadership. I'm not sure that the Eastern Cape can always come to the forefront and say that they are exemplary in terms of managing of resources, and oftentimes corruption scandals trace back to the Eastern Cape. The example of the KwaZulu-Natal floods is one that really should have been cautionary case study for provincial leadership to make sure that they are prepared. You always want to be prepared for disasters such as this, because if you recall, the national disaster was declared in 2022. There were record-breaking rains between the 8th and the 12th of April, and they caused devastating floods, landslides. We had casualties of 435 people, and over 128,000 people were affected, displaced homes, and the consequences and the rebuilding is still going on up until this particular point. So that should have been something that would have been sufficient for another provincial leader to say, okay, guys, we need to do something. We need to make sure we're ready for a disaster of this nature. At this point, there are calls for a declaration of a national state of disaster. You may be wondering, what are the requirements for a national state of disaster. A national state of disaster in South Africa can be declared under the Disaster Management Act when a disaster affects multiple provinces or a single province severely enough that it overwhelms existing capacity to manage it. As we were listening to the Premier of the province, Oscar Mabuyane, it's clear that he does not seem to view himself or the province as having the capacity to deal with these issues. He's talking about, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have this. I think that is a case in and of itself for an intervention and for a national state of disaster. The declaration process involves the National Disaster Management Center assessing the disaster severity and recommending classification as a national disaster. Then the declaration is made by the national executive and approved by the cabinet. I think they should get that process underway. Here are the key criteria for declaring a national state of disaster. Number one, the disaster causes or threatens death, injury, disease, or significant damage to property or the environment. The disaster scale and severity exceed the capacity of provincial and local authorities to respond effectively. There's need for a coordinated national government intervention and resource allocation. The declaration enables the government to implement measures to protect the public and to provide relief. At this point, I think it's necessary. The death toll is escalating. The consequences seem to be escalating, and the people need relief. It's not a time now where whatever money went missing or whatever capacities don't exist within the province should be used as an explanation why people are not getting help. These people deserve help and they should be helped. Just an update on what's happening in the Eastern Cape. Let's all pray for the people there. Let's all pray for those who've lost homes, lost their loved ones. God, we pray that you may be with the people in the Eastern Cape as they're going through this time. Amen.